For decades, a killer has roamed the streets of Japan. There was a pattern to their killings: the weak, the foolish, the outcasts. Those with no hope were perfect victims for this killing machine with a bloodlust that could not be satiated. The killings were always deemed accidents, and the monster would always escape justice. But one man had enough. This man had dedicated himself to the path of the warrior. The man had seen through the pattern of the killings, and he had tracked down the perpetrator. The man had not tracked the killer down out of a sense of righteousness, but for his own personal gain. As a martial artist, he sought great challenges to reach even greater heights. The man waited patiently, and the vile being had showed itself at last. The killer stared the man down with no emotions. Meeting its stare dead on, the man had raised his fist, ready to strike with his most simple but most powerful technique. The straight punch that he had been perfecting since he began his training. Despite his selfish reasons for the challenge, his fist seemed fueled with the resentment of all the victims who were unjustly killed by this monster. He took his stance, pulled his fist back, and unleashed everything he had against his opponent. And he got fucking killed because he punched a moving truck with his bare fist. Well, the truck struck again. Good effort, though. How's it going, everybody? Today we've got another manga review, specifically an isekai, everyone's favorite. We really gotta get some taste. Anyway, today's isekai is one called Karate Baka Isekai, or Karate Master from Another World. Yeah, good stuff. Now, for the students of Japanese who are watching this video, they may have recognized a key word that wasn't included in the translation. That is that baka sometimes means stupid. And that is a very accurate descriptor of our hero, who you have seen try to punch a 4-ton truck. The man is an idiot in every aspect besides karate. He's got karate on the mind. And after his death to the greatest reaper in Japanese history, he's transported to this new world. Well, I say new world, but at first he's sort of in a transitional staging area in his mind that's right before the new world, where a goddess tries to unsuccessfully explain his predicament. The man is so obsessed with karate that he's not even listening. He's trying to think about his rematch with the truck. The different ways he could have incapacitated the driver, he could have flattened a wheel. This man is a karate freak, and I fucking love it. You may have guessed by my new attire, but this is my Rock Lee karate shirt. Rock Lee actually does more kung fu. He's more of a Jeet Kune Do guy based on Bruce Lee. I love martial arts is the point I'm trying to get across. So the fact that this main character comes into an isekai and gets offered a brand new cheat skill, something to really turn the tides in his favor in this new world, and goes, nah, fuck that. I believe in my karate. This man has decided that if a problem cannot be solved with karate, it is not a problem that he is gonna solve. If he dies because he doesn't have a skill, that just means he wasn't a good enough karateka. Karateka? That doesn't sound right, but I think it is right. That's the main premise. This man goes to a fantasy world and doesn't take any magic, doesn't take any new skills. He's just fighting fantasy creatures and fantasy tropes with nothing but his empty fists. This is the manliest isekai I've ever seen. Oof. He wants to fight strong opponents with his karate, and this isekai setting gives him new opponents of a stronger caliber. He instantly gets his chance when the first thing he sees is a rampaging minotaur on his actual isekai transportation. And he does so in a surprisingly realistic way. I'm liking this more and more, I gotta say. You see, martial arts series are hard to come by, and the ones that I do get either get canceled way too early, or they evolve into superpowers, which I didn't want to see that. Granted, this is still a fantasy world, so his actions are exaggerated, but he's making use of the weak points. He goes for the nose, he goes for the solar plexus, which I've been hitting the solar plexus. That shit hurts. And of course, the best area to go for when you're fighting a large male creature, the nuts. And that's how he takes down the Minotaur. Not only does he destroy this Minotaur, he immediately mocks it by saying that he'd lose to Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson and other pro wrestlers that he's fought against for his sparring. You know, that's high praise. After defeating the Minotaur, he also meets what is presumably the main villain of the manga, or at least one of the big players. And that big player just so happens to be an otherworlder like himself who actually did take the cheat skill. And that is a decent summary of the first chapter of this, honestly, I've used this a few times, refreshing manga. I fucking love this shit. All the chapters are basically geared around him fighting a new archetype. Like, he fights the Minotaur. It's like karate versus Minotaur, karate versus armored knight, karate versus dragon. You get the idea. Fun stuff. Throw in a dash of constant villain underestimation and just a pinch of a growing harem of martial arts disciples, and you've got yourself a hearty isekai stew. Now, like I said, I'm a big fan of martial arts, so I've already given this series a huge bump. Now, in regards to the story, honestly, it's a mixed bag. I will admit, the fight scenes, which are fantastic. Like, I would love to see this animated, despite the fact that I think it's very unknown at this point. Like I said, the story itself is generic, carried by the fight scenes. Okay, I say it's a bit generic, and I mean more so in the way the characters act, because there is a semi-unique plot brewing. So the brewing plot that is established is that these planeswalkers, or the transmigrators, and you'll notice I haven't said the main character's name, and that is because for the first few chapters that I read, he is mostly referred to as the planeswalker, or sensei, or the karate guy. You know, he does have a name. I'll put it on the screen. I don't know if that's also an alias, but I read that on the wiki page, so that's technically a spoiler, I think. The actual plot is that otherworlders, all who have taken the cheat skill, are sort of rebelling. They've already defeated the Demon King, and afterwards they were like, hey, wait a minute. I'm super powerful. Why am I listening to these people? The few fights the karate idiot gets into with the planeswalkers early on hint that they're doing this out of necessity, or in, a belief in justice. You know how it goes. It's got the bones of a story I might want to read, but honestly, I kind of don't want to read any story except this guy fighting against various fantasy creatures. I want to see him take down mages, dragons, lizard folk, orcs. I just want to see that. Sometimes a man just wants to see karate beat magic. I do think the story moves a bit too fast for my liking, in that I would have appreciated seeing him struggle in the wilderness for a little longer using karate. He kind of instantly makes connections, and the plot progresses nicely if you're more interested in that overarching plot I mentioned. And he, of course, still fights fantasy monsters, but he has the benefit of, people telling him about what he's fighting, or, he's like, oh, that's a dragon, be careful, as opposed to just being like, fuck, I gotta figure out how to beat this guy. Personally, it's hit or miss, but the hit for me might be the miss for you, and the miss for me might be the hit for you. Obviously, I've mentioned I love the fight scenes. It looks like the hits have impact, and the author draws from a lot of real-world karate feats. The art is a knockout punch. Let me try that again. Should it be an isekai? This is a question I ask of all new isekai I read, because I want to make sure I'm reading something that's not just using the setting as an exposition dump and nothing else. And I will say, this absolutely deserves to be an isekai. The man gets transported and uses his own skills. Skills from the modern world, albeit rooted in, centuries of tradition, but skills from the modern world in the fantasy setting. And I'm pretty sure that the Planeswalker is a practitioner of Kyokushin karate. Kyokushin karate is often considered, at least it was back in 2013 when I was looking heavily into it, the most practical form of a traditional martial art. It's not looked down upon by UFC fighters. It's actually, I know a few UFC fighters, I think George St. Pierre, GSP, but him and Vladimir Putin both know Kyokushin to some extent. Kyokushin karate was actually developed by a Korean man, Mas Oyama, which of course to my Spanish viewers means more Oyama. I'm a big fan of this guy. Now, he did do some animal cruelty as he was famous for karate chopping bulls' horns off. The man is a karate legend. Now, as for the negatives, I've mentioned a few technically. The story isn't my favorite when it's not about fighting monsters. But the biggest negative of all, and this is very common in isekais, especially ones that I read when I've run out, the translation is not official. What this means is, right now, as of making this video, the first 10 chapters are gold. The rest, not great. I don't mean to disparage the fan translators who have picked it up. Because of them, I can read more without paying a dime to... Well, nobody. No one is picking up. I would actually gladly pay Shueisha. I don't know who we got. Tokyo Pop, they went out of business. Point is, I would pay someone for a decent translation. Not a great translation. If you love martial arts and you love isekais, it's definitely worth a read. And another plus, I didn't see a lot of fan damn it.